As the family raised their glasses, Malaika's mother-in-law, Auntie Zeba, slammed her hand on the table and sneered, "What are we celebrating? A woman who can't even give us a child! She's nothing but a barren tree!" The room went silent. But then, Malaika's husband, Yumo, stood up, and what he said next made even Auntie Zeba's face go pale. No one at that table would ever forget this night. Malaika had always dreamed of being a mother. She loved children and imagined her home filled with laughter and tiny footsteps. But year after year, no child came. At first, people were quiet about it, but slowly the whispers started. At weddings, birthdays, and family gatherings, she would feel eyes on her. Some aunties would look at her with pity, others with hidden judgment. They would smile to her face, but speak behind her back. "Still no baby," they would say when she passed by. Poor Jomo. He married a woman who can't even give him a child. At family dinners, conversations would turn cold when she entered the room. The women would talk about their kids, who had walked first, who got top grades, then glance at Malaika and quickly change the topic. Her heart would ache, but she smiled through the pain. Even children were not kind. Some of her nieces once asked her, "Auntie, why don't you have a baby?" And the whole room had gone quiet. Malaika had simply smiled, though her heart broke inside. Her mother-in-law, Auntie Zeba, was the worst. She never missed a chance to remind everyone that Malaika was empty. Once, during a family prayer, she loudly asked God to bless the family with real women who could bring forth life. Everyone knew who that was aimed at. Malaika felt like a shadow in her own family. She cooked, cleaned, and loved everyone deeply, but no one truly saw her. They only saw what she couldn't give them, a child. There were nights she cried alone in the bathroom, holding a towel to her mouth so no one would hear. She had done all the tests, taken all the herbs, prayed every night. Still nothing. And yet, no one cared about her effort. They only cared about the result. At one point, she even blamed herself. She wondered if she had done something wrong in her past. Maybe God was punishing her. But through it all, she stayed quiet. She didn't want to cause trouble or shame Jomo. She loved him too much. She thought maybe, just maybe, things would change. Maybe they would stop. But the mockery never ended. The pain never left. And even though she was surrounded by family, Malaika felt completely alone. All she wanted was love and understanding. But what she got instead was silence, cold shoulders, and cruel whispers that cut deeper than any knife. The sun had just started to set when Malaika finished dressing. She wore a bright orange dress with golden beads, her hair neatly tied, and light makeup on her soft face. Tonight was supposed to be special. It was her father-in-law's birthday, and the whole family was coming together to celebrate. The house was full. Cousins, aunties, uncles, neighbors. Everyone was laughing, chatting, and taking pictures. Big pots of food were cooking in the kitchen, and music played softly in the background. The table was long, filled with plates, glasses, and colorful decorations. It looked like a perfect evening. But Malaika didn't feel perfect. From the moment she walked into the room, she could feel it, those stares. Some looked at her with pity. Some just ignored her like she wasn't there. When someone joked about children running around the house, they laughed, then quickly went quiet as their eyes met hers. Malaika sat next to her husband Jomo, quietly sipping her drink, pretending not to notice the tension. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for. Jomo stood to make a toast. He smiled, lifted his glass, and said, "To family, to love, and to the many blessings we share." Everyone clapped, glasses clinked, laughter filled the room. But just as the noise settled, Auntie Zeba, Jomo's mother, stood up. She wasn't smiling. She looked around the table, then slammed her hand loudly on it. The room froze. All eyes turned to her. Malaika felt her heart start to race. "What are we even celebrating?" Auntie Zeba said, her voice sharp like a knife. "A woman who can't even give this family a child. This is not what a blessing looks like. A tree that bears no fruit is just taking up space." Silence fell. You could hear a pin drop. Malaika's face turned pale. She looked down at her plate, hands shaking. Her heart felt like it had been crushed. The insult was not whispered this time. It was shouted for all to hear. Right in front of the whole family. Some people gasped. Others looked away, uncomfortable. No one said a word. Even the children stopped moving. Jomo stared at his mother, stunned. Auntie Zeba didn't stop. I'm tired of pretending. We need grandchildren. We need a future. She can't give us that. Malika felt like running away, disappearing. She had taken many insults in the past, but never like this. Not in front of everyone, not so loudly. She felt small, humiliated, broken, and yet she didn't cry. Not yet. She looked around, hoping someone, anyone, would speak up. But the room stayed silent, heavy with shame. Everyone waited to see what would happen next. And in that heavy silence, something inside Malika began to change. For years, Jomo had watched in silence as his wife was blamed, mocked, and judged. Every time someone made a rude comment or gave her a sad look, he would hold her hand under the table but say nothing. He thought staying quiet was the best way to keep peace. But tonight was different. When his mother shouted those cruel words in front of everyone, something in Jomo snapped. He stood up slowly, pushing his chair back. Everyone turned to him. Malika looked up, tears filling her eyes, scared of what he would say or not say. But Jomo's face was serious and his voice was steady. "Enough," he said. The room went quiet again. He looked at his mother. "You've said too much tonight, and you've said too much for too many years." Auntie Zeba raised her eyebrows, surprised. "I only said the truth," she replied. Jomo shook his head. "No, Mama, you didn't. You said a lie, a painful, dangerous lie." People at the table looked confused. Some leaned forward, sensing something big was coming. Jomo turned to the whole family. His voice shook a little, but he spoke clearly. "Malika is not the reason we don't have children. I am." Gasps filled the room. One auntie covered her mouth. A cousin dropped his fork. Even Auntie Zeba's face changed. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. "I went to the doctor," Jomo continued. "Years ago, I found out the problem is with me. I can't father children. I hid it because I was ashamed. I let Malika carry the pain alone. I let her take all the blame because I was too weak to speak up." Malika's eyes filled with more tears, but this time, they weren't just from pain. They were from the shock of hearing her husband finally tell the truth. Jomo walked around the table and stood beside her. "My wife is strong. She stayed by me even when the world pointed fingers at her, even when my own family treated her like nothing." He looked around the table. "And all of you let it happen. You believed the worst without knowing the truth." A heavy silence took over the room again. No one dared to speak. Some looked down, ashamed. Auntie Zeba looked like she had been hit with a wave of truth she wasn't ready for. Jomo held Malika's hand and said, "From today, no one will speak to her like that again. I won't allow it." Everyone sat still, unsure what to say. The moment was powerful. The secret was out. The truth had been spoken, and nothing would ever be the same again. Jomo sat in silence as the family around him tried to recover from the shock. But in his mind, he was no longer at the dinner table. He was somewhere else, years back, sitting alone in a small clinic, holding a white envelope with shaking hands. The doctor had just told him the truth. He was the one with the problem. His body couldn't produce children. It was no one's fault, just nature. But in that moment, Jomo felt like less of a man. He couldn't believe it. He walked out of the hospital that day with the report in his pocket, heart heavy, but lips sealed. When he got home, he saw Malika in the kitchen, smiling, cooking his favorite food. She hugged him and asked, "Did the doctor say everything is okay?" Jomo froze. He couldn't say it. He couldn't bring himself to break her heart or face the shame. So he nodded and lied. "Everything's fine." From that day, he carried the guilt like a heavy stone on his back. Every time someone whispered that Malika might be barren, he looked away. Every time his mother made her little remarks, he kept silent. He wanted to protect himself, protect his pride. He thought, maybe the truth would pass. Maybe somehow a miracle would happen. But the truth didn't pass. It stayed. It grew heavier. Jomo remembered one night clearly. Malika had come to him crying, asking, "Is something wrong with me? Why can't I give you a child?" And all he could do was hold her, say nothing, and pretend to be strong. But inside, he was breaking. He knew it wasn't her. It was him. Every tear she cried, every insult she faced, was a wound on his heart. But still, he didn't tell her. His ego wouldn't let him. He thought being a man meant hiding weakness. But now, looking back, he realized it only made everything worse. He remembered how she stopped smiling slowly over the years, how her eyes dimmed, how she avoided family events. He had watched the woman he loved fade into sadness, and he let it happen. He remembered hiding the medical report deep in his drawer, as if keeping it out of sight would erase the truth. He hated himself for it. And now, Sitting at that table, after finally speaking out, Jomo felt something lift off his chest, but also a deep pain. He had waited too long. He had let her suffer for years. He had loved her, but he had failed her. The flashback ended as he looked at Malika beside him. She wasn't just the woman who stayed. She was the woman who carried pain that didn't belong to her, and he swore to himself he would never let her carry it alone again. The room was still tense after Jomo's big confession, but he wasn't done. He looked straight at his mother, Auntie Zeba, the woman who had just called his wife a barren tree. His eyes were full of pain, but also full of truth. "Mama," he said softly, "you should be the last person to speak about this." Auntie Zeba frowned. "What do you mean?" Jomo stood taller. "You judge Malika, you shame her, but you forget your own story. Or should I remind you?" Gasps rippled around the table again. Everyone was confused. Some leaned in closer. Malika looked up, surprised. Auntie Zeba's face changed. Her smile disappeared, and her eyes darted from side to side. She looked nervous for the first time. "You've hidden it for so long, even from your sisters," Jomo continued. "But I know the truth. I found the papers. I saw everything." The room went completely silent. "You also struggled to have children," Jomo said. "For 5 years after marrying Baba, you couldn't conceive. You were broken. You cried. You visited doctors, pastors, even traditional healers. Nothing worked." Auntie Zeba shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She opened her mouth to speak, but stopped. "And then," Jomo said, his voice steady, "you quietly adopted a child. You never told anyone, not even Baba's side of the family. You passed him off as your own flesh and blood." The shock hit the room like thunder. A cousin whispered, "Is that true?" One uncle looked away, clearly uncomfortable. People started murmuring, their eyes fixed on Auntie Zeba. "I always knew," Jomo said. "I found the adoption papers when I was 16. I never said anything because I respected you. I understood your pain. I kept your secret. But now I see, you used your past to shame someone else, just to feel better about yourself." Auntie Zeba's hands trembled on her lap. Tears filled her eyes, but pride kept her quiet. Her face was pale now, no longer proud and angry. She looked like a woman who had just been stripped of her mask in front of everyone. "You, of all people, should have protected Malika," Jomo said, his voice rising with emotion. "You should have stood by her, but instead, you repeated the same pain that nearly destroyed you." People around the table started shaking their heads. One aunt whispered, "I can't believe it." Others looked at Auntie Zeba with a mix of pity and disappointment. Malika sat frozen. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. The very woman who had tortured her with words, who had made her feel less than human, had once walked the same road of pain, and instead of showing kindness, she had chosen cruelty. The truth was out. The mask had fallen, and the family would never look at Auntie Zeba the same way again. Malika couldn't sit there any longer. Her heart felt too heavy, her chest too tight. Tears filled her eyes, and before anyone could stop her, she stood up and walked away from the table. She didn't say a word. She just needed to breathe, to be alone, to escape the eyes and whispers. Her heels clicked softly on the floor as she walked out of the house and into the quiet night. The cool air touched her face, but it didn't stop the tears from falling. She leaned against the wall outside, covering her face with both hands, and cried. She cried for all the pain she had held in for years. She cried for every insult, every fake smile she had given, and every night she cried into her pillow. She cried because she never thought her pain would be seen or heard. But now, everything had been said out loud in front of everyone. The truth had come out, but instead of feeling happy, she felt broken. Everything she had been through rushed back to her all at once, and it felt like her heart couldn't take it. Suddenly she heard footsteps behind her. She quickly wiped her face, not wanting anyone to see her like that. But it was Jomo. He had followed her, his face full of worry and love. He reached for her hand gently, but she stepped back. "Why didn't you tell me before?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "Why did you let me carry that pain alone?" Jomo looked down, ashamed. "I was scared, Malika. I was weak. I thought hiding it would protect us. But I see now, it only hurt you more. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." She looked at him through teary eyes, and for a moment she wanted to scream, to hit him, to walk away forever. But then she saw something real in his eyes. Not just guilt, but deep regret and a promise to change. "I won't let this be the end of your story," Jomo said. "You are more than what they called you. You are strong, You are kind, and you are the reason I stand tall. From now on, I will speak out. I will make things right. Not just in private, but publicly. The world will hear the truth." Malaika didn't say anything, but her heart felt something shift. She was still hurt, still broken, but for the first time, she felt seen. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a woman who had survived deep pain, and now she had the chance to turn it into strength. She looked up at the stars in the sky, wiped her tears, and slowly nodded. Something in her eyes changed. The same tears that once showed weakness now showed power. She wasn't just crying anymore. She was rising. After Malaika and Jomo returned to the dinner table, the room felt different. No one was laughing anymore. No one was eating. The air was heavy with tension, and everyone was looking around, unsure what to say. Auntie Zeba sat quietly, her head lowered. For once, she had nothing to say. But the silence didn't last long. One of Jomo's cousins suddenly spoke up. "I always knew something wasn't right," she said. "I saw the way Malaika was treated, and it never felt fair." Her voice shook, but she kept going. "I'm sorry, Malaika. I should have spoken up." Another aunt sighed deeply and nodded. "Me too. I knew about Auntie Zeba's past. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to cause drama. But now I see that staying silent was just as bad." Malaika looked at them with tired eyes. She didn't know what to say. It hurt to know that people knew the truth, but still let her suffer. At the same time, it felt like a small crack of light was finally coming through, but not everyone felt the same. Another uncle stood up, clearly angry. "This is a family matter. It should have stayed private. Why are we digging up the past and embarrassing each other like this?" One of Auntie Zeba's close friends nodded in agreement. "Exactly. What's done is done. Why shame the elders? Malaika should learn to forgive and move on." And just like that, the family was split. Some stood with Malaika, finally speaking up and showing her love. Others defended Auntie Zeba, saying she was just emotional, just concerned about the family name. Voices started rising. People argued back and forth across the table. What had started as a celebration had now turned into a battlefield of truth and opinions. Malaika sat quietly in the middle of it all, watching the family tear itself apart. But instead of feeling afraid, she felt calm. She realized something powerful. The truth had finally come out. And even if it caused a storm, it was better than living in lies. For the first time, people were talking honestly. Masks were falling off. And even though it hurt, it also felt like healing had finally begun. Jomo stood beside her the whole time, his hand on her shoulder, supporting her. He didn't argue or fight. He just stood tall, showing everyone that his loyalty had shifted. He was no longer trying to please both sides. He had chosen Malaika. Some family members came to her, hugged her, apologized. Others walked away, shaking their heads, too proud to admit they had been wrong. But no matter what side they picked, one thing was clear. The family would never be the same again. Lines had been drawn, secrets had been revealed, and now everyone had to choose, stand with truth or stay in silence. The day after the dramatic dinner, something unexpected happened. A video from the dinner table had been secretly recorded and posted online. Nobody knew who did it, but the clip showed everything. Auntie Zeba's cruel words, Jomo's shocking confession, the truth about his infertility, and the moment he exposed his mother's hidden past. Within hours, the video spread like wildfire. People all over the town, and even beyond, started watching and sharing it. At first, Malaika was embarrassed. She didn't want the whole world to see her pain. She felt exposed and raw. But then, something amazing began to happen. Women from different places started commenting, messaging, and even calling her. They shared their own stories of being called Barren, of suffering in silence, of being blamed for things that weren't their fault. They thanked Malaika for standing strong, for not breaking down, for letting the truth come out. People started calling her brave. Some said she was a voice for women who had no one to speak for them. Her name began trending on social media. Bloggers wrote articles about her story. Radio stations discussed it on talk shows. Hashtags like #1 I stand with Malaika and #1 break the silence were everywhere. The pain she had once hidden had now become her power. Even some men joined the conversation. They admitted how society often blames only women for childlessness, and they praised Jomo for telling the truth and defending his wife. Couples began having honest talks. Churches and community groups invited Malika to speak. They wanted her to share her story, to help others heal. Auntie Zeba, on the other hand, faced harsh criticism. Many people were shocked at how she treated her daughter-in-law, especially after hiding her own past. Some defended her, saying she was just a product of her time, but most people saw her words as cruel and unforgivable. Her reputation in the community started to change. Malika didn't ask for any of this. She didn't plan to be in the spotlight, but now that she was, she decided to use it for good. Instead of hiding, she stood tall. She began visiting women's groups, sharing her story and listening to others. She became a symbol of strength, not just because she survived, but because she rose. What started as a painful moment at a family dinner had now sparked a movement. Women were no longer afraid to speak. Conversations were happening in homes, churches, and markets. People were learning that infertility isn't a shameful secret, and that every woman deserves respect, whether she has children or not. Malika's name was now known far and wide, but more than that, her courage was inspiring change, and she was just getting started. After everything that happened, Malika took some time alone. She stayed away from the noise, the attention, and even the family drama. She needed to breathe, to think, and to understand what her life meant now. The world saw her as strong, but deep inside, she was still healing. She asked herself many questions. What does being a woman mean? Is motherhood the only way to feel complete? Is her life still meaningful without children? Then, one morning, Malika woke up with a new kind of strength. She looked at herself in the mirror, eyes still tired, but this time filled with purpose. She had been through so much pain, but she didn't want it to be just pain anymore. She wanted to turn it into something that would help others. She thought about the women who wrote to her, those who cried silently, those who were shamed by their families, those who felt alone. And that's when she made her big decision. Malika started a foundation. She called it Silent Wombs, Strong Voices. It was a safe place for women struggling with infertility to talk, share, cry, and feel seen. She invited doctors, counselors, and women with similar experiences to join her. She didn't want any woman to go through what she went through. Years of pain, blame, and silence. People were surprised at first. Some thought she would try another treatment or adopt a child. But Malika made it clear. This wasn't about finding another way to be a mother. This was about finding a new purpose. She wanted to show the world that a woman's worth is not just in giving birth. It's in her heart, her strength, her kindness, and how she lifts others. Her foundation started small. A few women gathered every week in a rented hall. They talked, cried, and supported each other. But soon, more women joined. News stations came to cover her story. Donations started coming in. Within months, she had helped over 100 women. Some received free treatment, some got counseling, and some just found peace knowing they weren't alone. Malika also went to schools and churches, teaching people about kindness, respect, and the truth about infertility. She became a voice in her community, not because she shouted, but because she spoke with truth and love. Yumo stood by her through it all, proud and supportive. He had made mistakes, but now he was learning and growing too. Their relationship became stronger, not because of children, but because of honesty and healing. Malika's life had changed. Not the way she once dreamed, but in a way even more powerful. She didn't have a baby in her arms, but she had something else: hope, strength, and a mission that touched hearts. And for the first time, she felt full, whole, and proud of who she had become. Months had passed since the video went viral, and the dust was slowly settling. Malika had built something incredible out of her pain, and the world was starting to see her not just as a woman who struggled, but as a leader, a fighter, and an inspiration. Yet there were still whispers from her family. The same family that had once turned their backs on her now wanted to make things right. Auntie Zeba was the first to reach out. She sent a message asking for forgiveness, saying she was wrong for what she said at the dinner, and that she wanted to make amends. Other relatives followed. They reached out through calls, texts, and even visits. They wanted to sit down with Malika, apologize, and try to fix what had been broken. Malika didn't ignore them, but she wasn't in a rush either. She had made peace with her own journey, and she wasn't going to let the past drag her down again. She agreed to meet them at her favorite quiet spot, a small cafe by the lake, where the sun set just right and the world felt calm. When the family arrived, there were no big speeches, no grand apologies. It was awkward at first, everyone shifting in their seats, unsure how to start. Finally, Auntie Zeba spoke up, her voice trembling. "Malaika, I'm sorry. I was wrong to say what I said. I see now the pain I caused you, and I'm sorry. I've learned a lot from you, and I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me." Malaika looked at her, the woman who had called her Barren and had made her feel less than for so many years. She felt a wave of emotions, anger, hurt, but also a sense of release. She could forgive, but she wouldn't forget. She had learned to set boundaries. She looked at each of them, her voice calm but firm. "I forgive you," she said, her words measured but full of power. "But I want you to understand something. I may be childless, but I gave birth to my own strength. I no longer need your approval to feel whole. My life is mine to shape, and I will not let anyone make me feel small again." The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking. Auntie Zeba, along with the rest of the family, had tears in their eyes. They had never seen Malaika like this before, strong, unshaken, and unapologetic. They finally understood what she had become. Malaika stood up, ready to leave, but not in anger. She had forgiven them, but she had set her boundaries, and she was finally free. "I will always love you," she said, looking each of them in the eye. "But my life, my story, will no longer be defined by what you think of me." As she walked away, her heart was lighter than it had been in years. For the first time, she felt like she was truly in control of her own destiny. She had turned her pain into power, and no one could take that away from her. Her story, her strength, had become a beacon for so many others, and now nothing could ever dim that light.